Hello, everyone. Russell Goodman, Supply Chain Brain Senior Editor here, welcoming you to Gartner's continuing series, 5 Keys to Unlocking Supply Chain Value in a Time of Crisis. The title for today's program, Last Mile is so last year. Here's how to reach the future retail consumer. But before we get underway, just a reminder that a Q&A session will follow today's presentation. So please enter your questions in the Q&A box that you see on your screen as the program unfolds. Our presenter today will address as many questions as possible before we sign off, but not to worry, any questions still pending, he will get to offline. All right. I think it's fair to say that last mile is synonymous in many minds with home delivery of consumers' online orders. But things are changing. Things are changing. As requirements for receiving orders evolve in their complexity and variety, last mile operations, as they are now performed, are going to become outdated and ineffective. New models using urban, suburban, and rural strategies for order collection or delivery, and multi-retailer consolidation networks will change how retailers get products to their customers. In today's webinar, you will see we no longer define last mile as just delivery. Collection options will be included as well. You will embrace the innovative ways in which consumers and products can come together, and from now on, you will build into last mile plans the concepts of consolidation, collaboration, and environmental sustainability. To walk us through this all-important presentation today, we have Tom Enright, Research Vice President in the Consumer Retail Team at Gartner. Tom specializes in supply chain strategies and operations across all retail product sectors. His focus areas include distributed order management, returns management, e-commerce, marketplaces, and last mile fulfillment. Okay, and now to our presentation and to Tom Enright. Tom, welcome.
Thank you very much, Russell, for that introduction, and thanks for all of you for taking your time to talk to me, listen to me today. I'm broadcasting to you live from near London, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. So as Russell indicated, last mile is synonymous with home delivery. Sorry, I've got a problem with my slides. Apologies. Okay, great. Yes, we see typically companies, when they refer to last mile, they think about the activity of pushing an order towards a consumer. Typically an order that's placed online, either on a retailer or on a direct consumer brand. And last mile usually has the word delivery in silent brackets afterwards. My view of last mile is that it's a two-way street. It also includes collection, and we're seeing a lot of advancement in terms of the number of different options that retailers and brands are providing to consumers in terms of how they can get their hands on products. And that extrapolation of those methods are all part, in my view, of last mile activities. And when we think about sort of the typical kind of last mile activities that we look at today, they include these sort of activities, home delivery, collection, curbside, locker boxes. These are all methods by which the consumer and the product come together. And that's my key definition of last mile. It's around the connection of the consumer and the product. It's not just about the delivery on behalf of the shipping company, whoever they may be. So that's really the one key thing I really want to kind of leave you with today, is that last mile is around the, if you like, the marriage of the product and the consumer. And it's only when that takes place that the last mile in the eyes of the consumer has been completed. Now, if we think about what I mean by the last mile in the eyes of the consumer, let's think about a locker box collection, for example, or even a pickup in store collection. From the retailer's point of view, I can only deliver it so far. I'm not delivering it straight to the consumer. I'm delivering it into a location from which the consumer can then do a collection. And therefore, the last mile is both parties, both the retailer, the shipper, and the consumer playing their role in receiving the product. And why is this important? It's important because when we think about how supply chains are structured and how organizations put their different roles together, fulfillment sits above all of this. Fulfillment is about on time, in full, consumer receiving their product. If we have a fractured supply chain to some degree where the logistics arm says, well, it's all about me doing my part of it, the fulfillment isn't complete until the consumer receives the product. And therefore, this definition of last mile overarches all of the activities and all of the partners involved, not just those who are traditionally doing the actual shipping element. Now, clearly there's some last mile deliveries where the consumer has got no work to do other than perhaps open the front door. And that's fine. That's still one business doing all of the last mile. But where the consumer is doing some of the activity, that's still a last mile activity from their point of view, because it's all part of receiving the final product. Now, I've got three sections in the presentation today. I want to talk about delivery services and what we're seeing happening there. I want to talk about collection services. And then I'm going to close out by looking at some of the future advancements that we're seeing happening within the overall last mile ecosystem in totality. So let's think about delivery services. They're already pretty complicated. So there's a number of different locations within a retailer's network from which the product can be fulfilled. Its journey starts. And that may be shipping from a traditional store. It may be shipping from a large urban store, which acts as a hub in a hub and spoke model, whereby that hub store is actually doing the shipping on behalf of perhaps smaller stores. We can see shipments from distribution centers, from suppliers and manufacturers, the emergence of micro fulfillment centers, particularly within grocery. So if you're not familiar with micro fulfillment centers, these are typically 10 to 20,000 square feet kind of extensions onto the side of an existing store or inside an existing store, typically full of robotic handling systems, shuttling systems, designed to fulfill orders up to 10 times quicker than somebody could inside the store, walking up and down the aisles to complete a customer's order. And so micro fulfillment centers are growing as a new node within a delivery network. And their bigger brother, if you like, dark stores, typically are outside of towns, and they will be a node in a network that's doing a lot of delivery into that kind of urban area on behalf of individual stores, and often not needing stores to do any shipments because the dark store, which is largely a distribution center, is doing all of the work. But the number of different places to which these shipments then arrive are equally varied. So we've got people's homes, we've got their offices, deliveries to locker boxes, parcel shops run by third parties, collection in store. Some of the leading retailers we speak with say that up to 50% of their online orders are now being collected by consumers. And that's a good thing for retailers because typically consumers will spend 10 to 15% more than the value of the product that they're collecting whilst they're in the store performing that collection path. And that's all revenue coming into the last mile service. If we think about last mile as delivery, it's viewed as being a cost, very often a loss leader cost. I don't make money from deliveries. Whereas if we include store collections as part of last mile, we're now seeing last mile driving value and adding revenue to an overall portfolio of services. And then we have these random locations, which could be a hotel, a conference center, somewhere where a person is there temporarily, but that's still the point in which the product needs to be delivered. So it's a complicated setup. There's many of these individual nodes within a typical network, and there's clearly lots of homes and lots of offices to deliver to as well. And so embracing this wider view of last mile as being a two-way street encapsulates all of these elements into a single view of how do we do fulfillment correctly. Now, part of the problem, and there's a lot of problems within last mile today, is that most delivery vehicles are sub-optimized. So in the US, the average delivery vehicle is less than 50% full by weight, and in Europe, slightly more full, but only about 65% full by capacity. And why is this? It's because a lot of retailers operate their supply chains independently. They all look the same to some degree. They all perform the same kind of last mile functions, but ultimately they're driving their own vehicles down the same streets, sometimes delivering to the same consumers. And add into the mix this perceived need for speed and rapid fulfillment on behalf of consumers means that very often vehicles have to start their journey before they have been optimized in terms of fill. And that's adding to environmental issues, it's adding to CO2 emission increases, and it's only going to go in one direction the more the current model of fulfilling online orders remains in place. And one of the future concepts I'd like to talk about later is how retailers can start to collaborate more to minimize empty vehicles, maximize fill, and reduce things like carbon emissions. And a statistic from the US Department or Bureau of Transportation says that only 1 in 4 US vehicles are more than half full by weight. And it's not even much more than half full. And so we're seeing a lot of transportation involved, more transportation than we really need to deliver the volume of product required. And as e-commerce deliveries and e-commerce sales in general increase, the need for transportation equally increases at a time when we have a driver shortage. And also much more difficult to find new distribution centers to open up. So many things feel like they're not really going in the right direction. In Europe, it takes 3 trucks to deliver what will fit into 2. So 65%, that's the problem. And therefore, reducing this through collaboration, through almost operating a multi-speed supply chain where consumers can actually be incentivized to wait slightly longer for their product, that all allows for an improvement in vehicle fill. Now, let me give you an example of a really interesting organization I came across recently called Easy Bins. So Easy Bins are a grocery delivery provider. They operate currently in 8 markets in the US. And what Easy Bins do is they partner with a number of different grocery retailers. They allow consumers to order from those different retailers, but then they deliver everything to them as a single delivery. So they operate, as I say, a relatively small market right now, but real plans to grow. And what they've seen is that 60% of consumer orders contain products from more than one retailer. So they're not creating a market to allow people to shop from multiple retailers. 60% are already doing so. The benefit is I get that delivered as a single delivery, as if I had only shopped from one individual retailer. So great opportunity to think about consolidation. The Easy Bin staff themselves pick product in stores, bring that back to a cross-docking facility where it's consolidated and then moved out to the consumer. And the fulfillment's pretty fast. It's same day, it's next day, and it's a real opportunity to present what consumers really want, which is a single box on a doorstep, even though I've ordered from multiple retailers. It's a great example of a startup doing something very different within the last mile space. And one of the compelling reasons why delivery needs to be consolidated and needs to be rethought again is the overall cost. So the global average parcel cost to a retailer is just over $10, of which they get back about $8 in general in recovering from fees charged to consumers. But that means that the average vehicle, or the average order rather, loses $2 per last margin. And every retailer is kind of losing the same kind of thing, or potentially losing 20% of the overall cost. So that's not sustainable either, to have many, many retailers facing the same problem with 2/3 delivery vehicles and all of the emissions that go with it. So building a really compelling case for consolidation. And the cost more broadly, last mile accounts for 53% of total cost of shipping and 41% of supply chain costs. So it's a very, very intensive, cost-intensive element for a reasonably small part of the overall supply chain journey. If we think about everything from sourcing right through to the point of delivery, a lot of the cost is very weighted towards the final step. And this is a real opportunity for companies to think about how to reduce that element. Now, from an emissions point of view, if we don't do anything other than just carry on the way that we're delivering from a last mile delivery point of view, emissions in urban delivery areas will increase by nearly 1/3 within the next 8 years. And that is a terrifying thought when we think about the fact that that can be reversed through a different way of operation within an overall last mile ecosystem. And not every delivery is successful. 5% of all last mile deliveries fail in the US. And the cost of the failure is much higher than the cost of a successful delivery. I've got the reverse logistics piece. I've got to pay for a vehicle and a driver that essentially haven't completed their task because the product's now still in a network. And I've got a new attempt to deliver to the consumer again. Consolidating deliveries and having less individual knocks on the door means that the chances are the consumer is going to receive their parcels more often. Think about the Easy Bins example. I need to stay in once to receive product from 3 different retailers. Whereas if I don't use Easy Bins, I've got to stay in 3 times to receive the product from those 3 different retailers. So minimizing costs and last mile is really an opportunity that consolidation can help us to deliver.
Today's webinar is brought to you by barcoding. Barcoding and Honeywell are transforming last mile delivery technology. Along with industry-leading mobile computers, barcoding stay live services combined with Honeywell operational intelligence enable workers and enterprises to more efficiently and accurately manage last mile delivery workflows. And today's webinar is also brought to you by Ortec. Since 1981, Ortec has been a global and leading partner in data-driven decision support. Ortec's supply chain design is a powerful supply chain optimization solution for strategic and tactical analysis. The software helps our customers lower costs, enhance service levels, mitigate risks, and evaluate what-if scenarios for continuous improvement. Ortec supply chain design is designed for strategic network design and tactical supply chain planning challenges. It provides fact-based advice for supply chain decisions. All right, back to today's expert, Tom Enright.
Thank you very much, Russell. I'm not sure why I'm having problems advancing that. Great. So covered delivery services. Let's have a look at the direction of collection services within the overall market. So we think about collection primarily as being buy online, pick up in store. And that's the model on the left. The assisted service in store, somebody goes to a customer service desk or an individual associate, receives the product that they've ordered online. We also see the development, quite rapidly development of lockers. So self-serve in store, consumer visits the store, doesn't need to see an associate, picks up the product through a unique code or a QR scan or something of that nature, and off they go. Clearly limitations as to the physical size of the product, and also limitations as to how quickly the consumer actually picks up the orders, because these lockers are not, infinite in terms of their size, and therefore they can pretty quickly fill up with uncollected orders unless the consumer is visiting at a relative frequency. And so we start to see some ideas around how would I incentivize a consumer to arrive early? How would I incentivize a consumer who wishes to use this locker to return the product? How can I make them do that quite quickly so I can get that product back in sale? And we have the same issues and the same opportunities with self-serve outside of store. So whether this is at a petrol station, gas station, whatever it may be, it allows the consumer to be independent. Now, there's nothing massively new in all of these. I'm not trying to pretend that this is some futuristic thing that's coming our way, but it does mean that when we think about collection options, we have to think about the breadth that's being provided, because these are starting to become competitively different in terms of what one retailer offers versus another, which may be more or less convenient to a consumer. And curbside, which pre-pandemic was really limited to companies who had physically large big box stores. The entry point was having a curb, and therefore someone who's on a second floor of the shopping mall didn't have the opportunity to do curbside collection. But we've seen organizations, particularly some mall owners during the pandemic, allowing consumers to pick products up from multiple retailers inside the mall through a single visit to the parking lot and picking the product at that point in time. So again, an opportunity around consolidation. And curbside, probably about twice as often available now than pre-pandemic because of the number of store closures and the way in which retailers have to react in terms of making services available. We also see some differences, and this is really important when it comes to how consumers behave in terms of the product that they buy depending on the different services. So pet owners will potentially pick up much larger bags of pet food when they're doing so via curbside than if they're doing it either on foot or inside a locker. And so The product size itself, the product format can change depending on the way in which consumers use different services. And that has knock-on effects right into assortment planning and space planning. We'd never normally think of curbside and space planning being linked, but when we think about more people using curbside frees up space in store for some other product because of the way in which they're collecting larger elements. So it's very holistic in terms of how these things link together. And to reinforce the point that a lot of services are already available, here's a view of what's happening today. So we surveyed over 60 retailers. We asked them which services they have available today to their consumers, what they plan to offer in the next 2 years, and what perhaps isn't right for them within that time frame and don't have any immediate plans. And the numbers here that are most surprising is curbside. 55% have it today. A further 15% will have it in a couple of years' time. But the pickup at locker box, either inside the store, self-service terminal, still reasonably mature. And when we look forward 2 years' time, virtually all of these numbers will be over 50%. And so more than half of consumers will have the option to use these different collection services, depending on who they're shopping with, as more and more retailers make these things available. And equally, for everybody who's going to use some of this, that's cutting down on delivery options. So if we think about the loss we're making on delivery of $2, plus the increased revenue we get from the collecting consumer spending something more in store, that holistic view I mentioned at the beginning of saying delivery and collection are both part of last mile, that means not just looking at delivery as being something that loses money and collection as being something that gains, but actually looking at how those two can work together and potentially encouraging consumers to pick up product because that saves on the cost of delivery, but maybe incentivizing them through some future money off or discount or points in their loyalty card to come to the store as an alternative to triggering a loss-making delivery. So fulfillment as an overarching concept will understand and capture all of these elements. Now, when we think about collection in general, there's a number of things that consumers really want to see. First is a dedicated collection service desk. People who have already bought the product online, even if their credit card hasn't been fully paid through, as far as they're concerned, I've already made a purchase. The retailer's got my money. And so they don't really want to form a line at the checkout with people who are taking product from the shelves and have yet to pay for it. There's an expectation that I need a slightly elevated and more rapid service in many ways. I need clear parking bays if I'm doing curbside, and I really want to know where I'm going. So some of these are really the basics, but they're not always in place for every company. The order to pick up lead time typically should be quicker than standard home delivery. So same day, next day. We see a lot of cutoffs today around order by 6 p.m., still collect in the store, order after 6 p.m., where you can collect it tomorrow. Some stores use their own inventory. Some will have it shipped down to them from a distribution center or a hub store. But generally speaking, people don't want to order online and then be told you got to wait 3 days. So it needs to be a rapid service. And when the consumer doesn't necessarily show straight away, most retailers will offer a 7-day grace period where they'll hold that product for a period of time, and good customer service triggers an email or a message to say, hey, it's day 6. Are you still coming to collect the product? If not, we'll move it back into our core inventory. So these are elements that are all part of this. One of the things we found in the UK a couple of years ago, because buy online, pick up in store is more developed in the UK than other parts of the world, the novelty had kind of worn off to many consumers, particularly those under the age of 30. And nearly 1 in 3 of those were not actually ever collecting the product. They almost viewed it as a form of reservation, but then they maybe looked for a product elsewhere and never told the retailer that they weren't showing. So there's an implication in terms of how long that product's held, and the fact that it's reserved essentially by one consumer means that it can't potentially be bought by another one. And this is all part of understanding the dynamics around collection. And people expect a pretty slick experience when they get into store themselves. So 80% believe that the collection process should take less than 10 minutes, and a quarter believe it should take less than 4, which is why it's all part of having this dedicated collection service desk that's going to be, managed by an individual, because the collecting consumer is collecting for a reason, and often that reason is around speed. And as I say, the upsell opportunity exists. It can be accelerated by basket aware associates. And what do I mean by that? I mean that the associate understands what's in the order and may actually have a quick conversation with the consumer about some additional product that they may want to buy. So it might be, I know you're here to pick up this particular top, but actually we see a lot of people buying these trousers that go with it. You haven't got them in the basket. Shall I go and get one for you now? So the 10 to 15% I mentioned will almost happen by accident because it's consumer behavior, but that can be accelerated in some way by a little touch of personal shopping as part of the collection experience. So these are the things that consumers say they want from collection experience, but the consumers themselves are also quite different to each other. So I've classified them as strange names. So the rusher, somebody who wants to just get in and get out as quick as possible. They know what they're here for. They're the ones who want to wait no more than 4 minutes and they're gone. There's then the browser, somebody who is intentionally visiting the store to do other things than simply collecting. And very often they may be asked when they come to collect the product, do you have anything else to buy while you're here today? If so, go ahead and do that and your product will be here when you come back. And that's a perfectly normal behavior in which a lot of consumers exhibit that sort of activity. There's then the instant returner. So somebody who wants to collect the product, perhaps maybe wants to try it on in a fitting room. Maybe they've ordered more than they need and they've no intention of leaving the store with all of the items that they've just collected. They will want access to fitting rooms. They'll want to be able to maybe test a product, look at it in the box, and they may return it almost as part of the collection service before they leave the store. And this is, particularly prevalent within apparel and accessories. And then you have the order amender. So somebody who's here to collect the product, but actually I want to do some other things. Maybe I want to return something that I bought recently. Maybe I want to add something to my cart that I've just picked from the shelf and I want to pay it to you on the customer service desk rather than join that big line over there. So these are people whose purpose is slightly different to some of the other ones. And then as companies start to roll out self-service lockers, not everybody knows how they should work. And so they will need some assistance with the process rather than feel that they've been abandoned trying to deal with a locker box format that they haven't seen before. Now, whilst these individuals may appear to be reasonably obvious and easy to understand, they're not always that easy to identify. So the rusher could turn into the order amender if they suddenly realize that there's something that they meant to do. And they can all exist in the store potentially at the same time. So when we think about how you manage the overall collection service, a lot of it's being aware of almost kind of the body language in some ways and kind of the intent of how people are coming to the store so that they get the right level of service that they're looking for. And you really don't want the rusher to be, stuck behind 3 order amenders without needing to have an extra person at the customer service desk. So it's being really agile as to understand what's actually happening in the store at any point in time. Now, let me give you a really good example from IKEA in Rome. So IKEA have got 2 stores in Rome, both broadly on the east. In terms of traffic congestion, Rome is the second highest in the world, second highest store. So it's not an easy city to navigate. And if you live in the west of Rome, the idea of doing buy online, pick up in store, not the most attractive way of doing shopping with IKEA. Now, IKEA could potentially open more stores, but that's all down to geographical demand. But what they've decided to do is to have a mobile collection service whereby they drive to nominated parts of Rome at certain times of the day and certain days of the week. And when consumers check out online, they can pick the time and the location to which they will then drive and collect their product from the mobile service. Now, this is a great way of expanding the idea of product collection across a very big congested city like Rome without necessarily expanding the number of stores. And if we think about how that could even apply to other industries, let's think about the beauty industry. Maybe that vehicle that somebody's collecting a product from, that's also where they can go and have a makeup test done. Maybe they've got time to do that. And they don't have to go and visit the store to receive all of the store experiences that they would normally get. So the notion of engaging with consumers in temporary locations that are pre-planned and consumers understand where they need to be This is a great way to expand the overall customer service interactions without making it very store based. And again, part of the overall last mile fulfillment strategy. The director of last mile delivery will not necessarily come up with this concept, but the director of fulfillment will be looking at collection and delivery and saying, let's bring these two things together because the last mile is now a two-way street. It's only complete when the consumer gets to the mobile point and picks up their product.
Today's webinar is also brought to you by Snap Fulfill. The Snap Fulfill warehouse management system is a tier 1 cloud-based WMS catering to fast-growing companies in D2C, e-commerce, and third-party logistics. With flexibility at its core, Snap Fulfill allows your business to quickly adapt to changing fulfillment demands and scale up and down as needed for peak seasonality. Snap Fulfill's unique rules engine puts easy configurability into your hands. And with an implementation speed of 45 to 60 days, you get a fast return on your investment. Visit Snap Fulfill to learn more. Folks, Gartner's Supply Chain Symposium and Expo in Orlando this year broke all records for attendance and for top-level sessions and presentations. Next year's, set for May 8, 9, and 10, also in Orlando, promises to be even better. Mark your calendars and be there. You do not want to miss Gartner's Supply Chain Symposium and Expo 2023. And now, back to Tom Enright.
Thank you, Russell. And so we go into the final section around future concepts. So this is an idea as to where last mile can further expand into new services that either are not available today or are available in a very small kind of trial method across different retailers. The first is a concept which we're calling offer and acceptance. What offer and acceptance is trying to do is to avoid what happens today in many cases, where individual consumers are making individual choices as to when they want to receive their deliveries, particularly around grocery. I may go for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, my neighbor 2 doors down may go for 12 noon, and somebody across the road may go for 3 p.m. in the afternoon. We're all making those independent choices. What the offer and acceptance option means is that the retailer who receives that first order at 10 p.m., the next time somebody in that neighborhood, however the neighborhood is defined, goes online to place an order, they're prompted with an offer for a time very close to the first person. The second person gets the same offer, and potentially that means that if everyone accepts the offer and is suitable to them, and they can clearly decline and still do their own time, but if they do accept, that single vehicle is delivering to 3 consumers who live relatively close to each other within maybe an hour-long period of window, rather than having to visit the same location 3 times a day, or having different vehicles delivering the same time of day. Now, this isn't just linked to grocery, it's available to any retailer potentially can develop this concept. The technology exists behind the scenes. We have routing optimization, we have transportation management systems, we've got websites that allow consumers to choose their delivery times. So it's bringing together what the retailer knows is happening behind the scenes in terms of where they're already committed to deliver to, and presenting that to the consumer as an offer that they can choose to accept or not. So it's a great potential way of increasing consolidation, maximizing vehicle fill, removing excess cost and excess emissions, and giving the consumers a great experience that they're happy to accept. The other concept is the expansion of curbside to not just be around collection. So today, the vast majority of retailers who offer curbside is a one-way transaction. You're here to pick up your product, I'm going to give you the product. Most consumers are not able to do exchanges or returns essentially through their car window. But if they walk 20 feet into the store, they can do both. Now, it may be good to get people to come into the store in the hopes that they may buy something else, but if they can't exchange and return things via curbside, it may put them off even shopping with them at all. So we see the need to expand, and it's available here and there, but it's not available widely. The notion of curbside being a more comprehensive engagement service that includes collection, exchange, and returns as a way to really drive consumer experience. There's also the option, as I mentioned earlier on, about the shopping malls of offering curbside collection. So many retailers inside the same mall. Can I, as a consumer, order from more than one, turn up once, park once, and receive everything? And can a mall operator service that multi-retailer collection model? Because that's a great way to allow me to have a really good experience at the mall, but have one single curbside collection if that's what I wish to do. So we can start to see the beginnings of this. People like Brookfield Properties bought out this model during COVID, but there's certainly some great opportunities for all mall operators to think about how they can expand the availability of curbside collection, should that be the kind of thing that consumers are looking for. And then up and down the country, and in fact, in many countries, we've got a lot of empty stores. Retailers going out of business, overcapacity. We know there's lots of stores opening, but there's an awful lot of stores closing as well. And when we think about urban, suburban, and rural initiatives, if a retailer doesn't have a store in a particular city or a particular town, one of the ways in which they could expand their brand to consumers is to say to the consumer, hey, you can order online, but you can pick up from this location in the city center, in which I have my own self-service locker boxes or something of that nature. And what's in my mind here is every bank on the planet has got some sort of ATM machine, but each bank is individual. There isn't a place I can go to in which I can walk in the front door and there are all the bank's ATM machines there. So for people who bank with more than one bank, that's a single visit to carry out multiple tasks. The collection and multi-retailer pickup and return store would operate in the same way. I can go to a physical location which used to be a store that belonged to another retailer. I walk in a door and I can collect products from multiple retailers, maybe even having fitting rooms, try product on and change it and return it. So we have the instant returner, we have the rusher. Not necessarily the browser would use this, but certainly there's a number of different consumers who like to collect product and can do so very efficiently and very conveniently through a single location, plus breathing a bit of life back into city centers. And speaking of city centers, what will happen if nothing changes by 2030? Well, some of the growths that we're projecting are a 78% increase in last mile delivery demand through the growth in e-commerce over the next 6 to 7 years. By that time, 60% of people will live in cities, and therefore that's generating increased demand for in-city delivery. And much as city councils will try and, fight that with congestion charge changes and other elements to try and protect emissions and the number of vehicles coming through, if we don't do anything, there will be 36% more vehicles in the top 100 global cities by 2030. And that's just unimaginable. That will also drive up by nearly a third the emissions from a last mile delivery point of view. But also due to all of this congestion, and I'd hate to think what this looks like in Rome, but due to all this congestion, journey times will increase. So deliveries will be less efficient. You won't have the drivers doing the same amount of deliveries because each one is going to take nearly 20% longer than they do today. And this is the challenge facing us when we think about last mile. And it's a challenge that can't be fixed just through a view of delivery, because collection will help to offset some of this as well. Now, I'm not saying that collection is great for the environment, because 100 people jumping in their cars to collect 100 parcels is doing a lot more environmental damage than a vehicle delivering to 100 homes. But it's a balance nevertheless in terms of the different services that are being made available. And one very futuristic concept, and it's my last slide for today, is changing the whole relationship between the consumer and the retailer. So today, virtually every retailer and consumer have the same interaction. Retailer says, here's my menu of delivery and collection options. Choose the one that you most like. You can avoid shipping fees by waiting longer. You can avoid shipping fees by collecting in store. You can spend up to a threshold and get free shipping. The game is the same for every single retailer broadly. What this concept, how much environmental damage do I want to cause, means is that rather than talking in terms of delivery times and costs and methods, the conversation would turn to the point that carbon now becomes the currency of conversation. And this isn't going to be available today or tomorrow, but the components that would make it happen would exist. And what this would look like would be the consumer essentially passes a challenge to the retailer that says, I want to buy this product from you, but the maximum amount of damage I want you to do to the environment is 1,000 things, whatever that thing may be, a measure of carbon emissions. Can you come back to me and give me the option that will allow that to happen? And so the consumer is essentially saying, almost like you would if you went into a restaurant, I want to eat no more than 1,000 calories today. What's on your menu? It's the same challenge. And then the logic behind the scenes, bringing together some technology that exists today, but not all of it, essentially says, here's my proposal to you that gets that product into your hands and minimizes the amount of environmental damage. Now, that could be part of the offer and acceptance. It could be, I can get you next Tuesday because I'm already delivering to 2 or 3 of your neighbors, and therefore I think that your parcel in that vehicle will only do 850. So do we have a deal or not? This is, I think, the future of how we see last mile developing, is that the consumer gains greater control, and that presents a challenge to the retailer that's around minimizing environmental damage. And the retailer must respond in terms of how they can keep that consumer engagement and give them what they need through a wider view of last mile that is essentially a two-way street. So my recommendations, I guess, are fairly obvious in terms of what I've just spoke through. Changing the definition away from just delivery, thinking about collection, looking at some of these innovative ways, the IKEA example, easy bins, how much environmental damage do I want to do, multi-retailer collection points, and building everything that you do into consolidation, collaboration, and environmental sustainability. Because if we don't do that, all of the indicators are that we're going in the wrong direction. And we have to control last mile being not just a two-way street, but as clean a two-way street as we can make it. Thank you very much for your time. And I'll hand back to Russell.
Incisive and informative stuff right there. Very useful drill down, Tom. Thank you so very much. But we got to spend the next few minutes taking some of the questions, and they are in fact pouring in. Moderator's prerogative. I guess I get to pick the first one. And this one asks, we read a lot about consumers' expectations for fast delivery, but how do consumers actually choose same day and next day delivery options? Well, what would you tell that person?
I would say that the percentage of consumers who actually choose same day delivery is surprisingly small compared to the view as to how many consumers want it. So our surveys, and we've asked 60 or 70 retailers, we've asked them to take their online spending in totality and to break it down into the length of time that the consumers who bought were prepared to wait. So they told us that over 50% of consumers are prepared to wait 4 days or longer, but only 1.4% of their collective revenue comes from retailers choosing a same day delivery option. Now, this is a key thing because these numbers are not widely available in terms of most of the research that we hear about. A lot of the focus today is around consumer expectations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if we, as retailers, if we base our entire supply chain based on consumer expectations rather than looking at consumer usage, we're not getting the true direction in terms of how consumers behave when they're given everything that they need. Because the people who say I want same day delivery also want free delivery, they also want free returns, they want environmental shipping. It's making it available but understanding the usage, and 1.4% is a number that you can take away as being the amount of revenue you make from same day delivery.
Here's a question about challenges, Tom. It says, what are the challenges of last mile supply chain, and how can data analytics help to solve the challenges of last mile? Well, what say you?
Well, I think data analytics runs through all of this. And I think it's not just around cost. I think it's a lot around sustainability. We need to understand the implications of our current models. We need to understand container fill, vehicle fill. Um, there's a need also to think about the amount of revenue that's made in both delivery and collection. But also, I think there's a big thing here around cannibalization, because many retailers have this portfolio of options available, collection and delivery. Consumers use them in many different ways. There's a real need to analyze that overall behavior to understand the total profitability of that portfolio. And I'll give you a quick example. If a retailer brings out a very attractive new service that costs them more than their existing service, such as self-service curbside, if consumers move towards that very rapidly and start to use that more expensive service quite a lot, that can bring the overall profitability of the entire portfolio down. And that's not necessarily easy to spot if we just look at services individually. So buy online, pick up in store customer may spend 20% more than the walk-in shopper. But if they visit 20% less often, then these things negate each other out. And then we say, well, the cost of servicing the walk-in shopper is greater than the BOPA shopper is greater than the walk-in shopper. Therefore, my profitability is gone. So I think the data analytics around all of that area is really interesting as well. And for any of you listening there, if you're interested in a piece of research, I've got something in the Gartner library called portfolio profitability. That's two of the words in the research note, and that explains this concept in more detail.
I must say, Tom, you have really stimulated a flow of questions. Here's one. How do you differentiate between HFC and a dark store?
So a dark store is typically a much bigger version of an MFC, MFC being micro fulfillment center, can be 10, 20 times larger. An MFC is small, packed with robotics, lots of shuttling systems, is designed to pick a limited assortment of product, the best sellers essentially, very quickly and get that product out and delivered to the consumer, almost on a kind of order by order basis. A dark store is actually laid out. It looks very much like a store that's closed. It's laid out in the aisles that the consumer would normally expect to see. Typically, it allows associates to go around either very manually and picking product into carts that they're ready for delivery, or we're starting to see the emergence of increased technology around sortation systems, chutes, goods to person type of operations. But typically a dark store will be in a much bigger location, so outside a very large urban city, whereas a micro fulfillment center may be attached to a store in a second or third largest city, but is servicing maybe within 15 to 20 miles of that area. And then we see companies operate both. We see companies have a decision and say, I can open 5 micro fulfillment centers in and around Atlanta, or I can open two dark stores and essentially process the same volume. So they are different, but they can be complementary as well.
Here's something that's top of mind for very many people these days, drones. The question is, well, what about the future of vans plus drones? Well, what would you say to that person?
I see no reason why the two of them couldn't operate together at the same time. There's obviously all sorts of regulations around drones right now in terms of aviation approval, etc. But they have a role in urban areas potentially where it makes much more sense to deliver via drone than it does to deliver via a vehicle, depending on the length of the distance. They're very limited in terms of their capacity, so a drone can't hold that much physical product. So it's less efficient in terms of delivering to many parcels to certain areas. We could see them combined together. We could see a situation where a vehicle delivers to a location and then the drones take over from there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of one or the other. They can certainly work both together, but they're going to be part of an overall fulfillment strategy. But I don't see a time when we look up and see multiple drones flying overhead and very few vehicles on the road.
Now, here's something, very interesting question here. First of all, thanking you for this presentation, which is indeed very interesting. The question is, don't you foresee an increase in scheduled delivery date from the customer rather than same day or next day? Interesting question. What do you say?
It's a very interesting question, and it's something that kind of still bemuses me a little. So if we think about how grocery works today, I can put together an 80 product grocery cart and pick an hour time slot 3 weeks from now or 5 days from now in which I want that product to arrive. I then decide to buy two items from an apparel retailer, and I'm told it might take 3 to 5 days, and I'll be told which day the night before. And so the experience in terms of scheduled delivery days is very, very different depending on who you're buying from. Typically, they're not free. You can have a situation where you can have a nominated day, which may be a Saturday or maybe any other day of the week. But because you're being specific with the retailer, they're then essentially hitting you with a charge. Now, the offer and acceptance logic reverses this and essentially encourages people to pick a scheduled time because it suits the retailer in terms of delivery. So I see schedule becoming more precise going forward, but it requires some of the other things to be in place around collaboration, around really understanding the network, understanding future delivery patterns, and being able to say to consumers, I can make this happen for you because I know what else is happening around that time and I can meet your schedule requirement. The other piece around offer and acceptance is consumers can actually be encouraged to choose the offer by the retailer reducing the cost of the delivery. So if I'm going to go for 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon for my groceries, that might be $7 or €7 or whatever it may be. If they say to me, hey, what about 10 o'clock on Friday morning because I'm with your neighbor at 9:30, I may do that for free because the neighbor is already paying for it, or we're going to split the bill between us, or I'll get some reduction. So I do see that the more precise delivery can be, the better it's going to be for consumers.
Tom, very, very quickly. Question is, congestion is something you've addressed. If people, however, are out to collect their parcels, won't that increase traffic and thereby emissions, et cetera? What do you say?
It will if the pure purpose of the journey is to collect the product. In reality, many people go for collection because they're already going to be out at some point in time anyway, and the collection is an add-on to their journey. So I'm going to do the school run, I'll call into the store beforehand. I'm going to the sports game, I'll call into the store after. So the more that an existing journey can have the collection added to it, rather than the collection being the only purpose for leaving, essentially the emissions are already taking place virtually anyway, apart from the extra little journey to the store. I'm not encouraging for a minute everybody to jump in their cars as a way of collecting their product, but I do see it as a role it can play in reducing the need for delivery and in reducing those emissions. If the emissions are already going to be delivered anyway, then let's bolt something onto that that's going to reduce the net effect.
Tom, as I said, there are many, many, many questions that are just pouring in, but we really are just about out of time. Time for one more question. Here it is. It's the silver bullet question. It goes like this. Is there a silver bullet to solving the last mile issues we have today around cost, sustainability, reliability, etc.? Well, how would you answer that? What would you say, sir?
I would say it's probably more of a silver gun with multiple bullets. The big key here for me is how do we bring all of these things that appear like they're going in the wrong direction together? And I don't believe any single retailer, even one the size of Walmart or Target or any of the huge retailers in Europe, can solve this alone. This is around collaboration. If we look at something like what American Eagle are trying to do now with their quiet logistics, is trying to encourage companies to partner together to reverse the direction of things that are happening. So how do I reduce emissions? How do I maximize truck fill? How do I minimize the delivery cost? How do I stop deliveries being a loss maker? These can't be just individually tackled. The silver bullet is how do you bring all of these things together so that they all start to reverse direction? And so it's a combined effort of taking many things that appear to be going in the wrong direction and reversing them together as a collective approach. And as I say, retailers need to work together to make this happen, because ultimately there's too many vehicles. Most of them are half empty. There's too many emissions. Consumers are getting longer lead times, and the cost is going through the roof. So, how do we take all of those things and turn them around? That's essentially the silver bullet.
All right. All right, Tom. Terrific, terrific, and highly useful information. But we really do have to leave it there, simply all the time that we have today. Folks, listen, don't miss the next episode in Gartner's continuing series on unlocking supply chain value. That's coming up on October the 19th at 2 p.m. At that time, Ryan Pope will talk about procurement and sourcing, top trends and challenges in that very, very important area. You do not want to miss that. And pencil in Gartner's Supply Chain Symposium and Expo 2023 as well, May 8th through the 10th in Orlando. Top minds in supply chain world will be there. You should be too. Okay. Many thanks to Tom Enright of Gartner for sharing his time and expertise with us today. Thanks to Gartner itself, and a big thanks to you for attending today. Take care and so long, everybody.
Thank you very much.